Have you ever wondered how our parish got its name? St. Boniface Catholic Church. Who was St. Boniface, anyway? Let's find out today. I'm going to show you my favorite stained glass window in the whole church. And it's probably one that you've never seen before, because it isn't out here in the main church. We've got to come all the way back here, past the coat rack, into the closet, past some pumps and cleaning supplies, and here is our patron saint, St. Boniface. So what can we learn about St. Boniface just by looking at his stained glass window? Well, we can see he's holding a shepherd's crook called a crozier. He's wearing a bishop's hat that's called a mitre, and so we can tell that he was a bishop. He's wearing this white little thing called a pallium. That's something that archbishops wear. So he was in charge of a whole big area. And he's holding the Bible, or maybe just the Gospels. And from that you can tell that he was a preacher. St. Boniface had quite a life. When he was growing up in Britain, he had a different name, Winfrith. Have you ever met someone named Winfrith? Me neither. Boniface decided when he was very young that he wanted to be a monk. So he went all over England to different monasteries, going to school, and then he was a teacher. That was his work at the monastery. Being a monk was hard work. They fasted and worked. They got up in the middle of the night every night to pray. But still, Boniface was pretty comfortable. He was living near his home. He liked his work as a teacher, and he was very popular with his students. But Boniface became convinced that God wanted him to do something different. When he was 35, Boniface left Britain and his students and everything he knew to go be a missionary to the Germans. It wasn't easy being a missionary. It still isn't easy being a missionary. Boniface had to spend a lot of time in the woods, even in the rain or the snow, traveling between little villages to preach about Jesus Christ. He didn't have very much success at first, but Boniface kept at it. He kept preaching and teaching about Jesus. Soon, many people in what is now Germany and the Netherlands wanted to be Christians, so Boniface baptized a lot of people. Here's a picture of him baptizing someone. You can see that they're doing it outside in a great big pot of water, in cold water. How'd you like to be dunked under that? Pope Gregory II made Boniface the bishop of that whole area of Germany. And he did all kinds of important things, founding churches, establishing monasteries, settling arguments between kings and princes. We have a lot of his letters still to the Pope, to kings, to different princes and people all around. But to St. Boniface, the most important thing he did was always to tell people about Jesus. There's one very famous story about St. Boniface that I want to tell you. It happened while St. Boniface was preaching in a town called Fritzlar. There was a huge old oak tree in the town dedicated to the German god Thor. You might have seen the superhero Thor in the movies. Well, the Germans worshipped him as a god. And sometimes they killed people at the tree as a sacrifice to Thor. Now, St. Boniface was having none of that. He knew that God didn't want any murder, so he made a big announcement. He told the people of Fritzlar, there is only one God, no thunder god Thor, and the one God doesn't want human sacrifice. And to prove it, I will cut down this tree, and Thor won't do anything to stop me. So when the day came, a huge crowd of Germans gathered all around, waiting to see St. Boniface be struck down by the thunder god Thor before he could cut down the sacred oak tree. St. Boniface took his axe and he chopped once, twice, 3 times, but he barely made the first full notch in the side of the tree when a strong wind blew through the forest and that huge old oak tree fell over practically by itself and split into 4 pieces. God himself took down the oak tree dedicated to Thor and proved to the Germans that nobody needed to be killed for false gods anymore. Now the next part of the story is a little bit less certain, but a lot of people say that after St. Boniface cut down Thor's oak tree, when the whole crowd was still standing there in shock, St. Boniface pointed out behind the oak tree a little evergreen tree that was growing there. And he told the crowds that not the oak tree of Thor, but that little evergreen tree should be their symbol of God, because it points up to heaven, because it's green all year round, it's alive all year round. That was the start of the Christmas tree which is a symbol of Christ at his birth, Christmas. And that tradition started in Germany, where St. Boniface preached, and now we have Christmas trees all over the world, symbolizing Christ. Now there's one other thing I want to tell you about St. Boniface. He was a witness to God in his life, but he was also a witness to Christ in his death. St. Boniface, when he was getting older, left his diocese with another bishop, and he went out to preach the gospel to more people who had never heard about Jesus, to be a missionary. And one day when he was planning to confirm a whole bunch of new Christians who had been baptized, there were some other Germans there who didn't want that to go forward. They came with swords and shields, and they said, no confirmation's going to happen today. Now the Christians, the new Christians, also had their weapons, and they were preparing to defend St. Boniface, but he said, no, there'll be no killing, there'll be no violence. I'm going to confirm these people, and if the Germans want to stop me, it would be an honor to die for Christ. And so he did. The Germans came with their weapons and they killed him before he could confirm anybody. And that's another way St. Boniface is a saint, is like Christ, because just like in his life, he witnessed to the truth and he lived his life for Christ, so he died for the truth. He died for his people and for Christ. And so that's like Christ, who came to us to teach us the truth, and he died for that truth, and he died for us. So that's another way that St. Boniface is like Jesus, is a witness to Jesus. And that word martyr means a witness. We use that word for people who have died witnessing to Christ. So St. Boniface shows us how to put Jesus first in our lives. He shows us how to be his witnesses, even if it's difficult, and even if we don't see much success at first. He shows us how to be courageous in preaching the gospel and standing up for what's right. And the great fruit that can come from that, too. St. Boniface's work bore great fruit all over Northern Europe. So St. Boniface, missionary, bishop, and martyr, patron of Germany and patron of our parish here in Waukee, pray for us.